Hey, welcome back to Anti-King. Have you ever had a pet you loved more than anything? Even more than some people? Some family even? Well, the movie we're covering today is sort of like that. Because today, we're covering Tusk. Tusk has a huge cult following, and I really doubt many of you haven't heard of it, but I don't care, I really want to talk about it, and it's my channel. So let's not waste any more time and dive right in. Tusk was released in 2014 and was created by none other than Clerks creator Kevin Smith. It was a weird time for Smith's career, as most of his successes were a decade in his rear view, and opinions of his work was beginning to wane in Hollywood. On a podcast, Smith and a friend discussed an article he found advertising a free living arrangement, so long as the tenant agrees to dress as a walrus. This was later revealed to be a prank, but nonetheless it got Kevin wondering, and after spending the podcast working out the details of the story, he took to Twitter to ask whether or not the movie should actually be made, and his fans responded overwhelmingly yes. It stars Justin Long and Michael Parks, and veers from body horror to psychological horror, with Smith's signature comedic tone underlying the whole thing. But that's not to say this movie isn't creepy. Thanks in particular to an outstanding performance by Parks, this movie works in a very real, very disturbing way. The movie begins with Justin Long's character, Wallace, hosting the podcast he does with his friend and dead people seer, Teddy. The podcast is basically just what Tosh.0 or Web Soup was at the time, where they pick out disturbing or somehow disastrous clips from the internet and mock them or comment on them. One in particular includes the Kill Bill kid, who's just a kid who cuts off his leg with a katana while doing his best Star Wars kid impression in his garage. Don't worry, buddy, it's bad CGI, you'll be fine. Wallace informs the listeners he'll be doing an interview with the Kill Bill kid soon, and after a quick sign-off, he's on a plane to Canada to do so. After some fun Canada jokes, a thing this movie does a lot, he arrives to a grieving family at the Kill Bill kid's house. It's revealed that after receiving tons of ridicule online, Kill Bill kid committed suicide, which Wallace crassly views as an inconvenience to him. He calls Teddy to lament his wasted trip and tells him he's gonna have to just find another Canadian weirdo to interview while he's there. Speaking of Canadian weirdos, Kevin Smith intended this to be the first of what he calls the True North trilogy, with 2016's Yoga Hosers being the second in the series, and the upcoming Moose Jaws, if it ever gets made, being the third. A lot of this movie loosely ties into Hosers, mostly through cast and locations though. The main two from that cast, who are Smith and Johnny Depp's daughters, by the way, and their location are visited soon as Wallace asks some disinterested gas station clerks for directions, and heads out, discovering a large, sprawling mansion when arriving. He makes his way inside and we're introduced to our antagonist, Mr. Howe.
You know, when people first become entangled with my name, it's much like a French bedroom farce. Now, Mr. Howe would be appropriate, but I prefer the intimacy of Howard.
Right. Howard. He's played expertly by Michael Parks in one of his final performances before his death in 2017. Rest in peace, man. Howard is a retired seaman, who offers Wallace compelling stories of the ocean, one being the story of Mr. Tusk, a walrus who helped save him from a shipwreck. This whole sequence might be my favorite of the entire movie, as this scene is about 6 straight minutes of dialogue, and as boring as that may sound, it's incredibly well written and starts to breathe life into what's been kind of a middling movie so far. He offers these tales over some sleepy time tea, extra sleepy, and soon we see Wallace lose consciousness. He comes to in a flashback from right before taking this trip, where we start to see some of what drives him. During post-coital conversation with his girlfriend Allie, she expresses concern with the type of content he's seeking out, pointing specifically to the Kill Bill kid, saying the old Wallace she knew would never want to punch down the way he is. He's incensed that she would even compare him to his less funny, and more importantly here, less successful younger self. He came up in the stand-up comedy circuit, and you can tell he feels resentment for not making it doing the stuff he wanted to do. It's implied he's defaulted to this provocative shtick because that's what sells. It's an interesting commentary on content creation that I'm sure a lot of people relate to today. Sometimes the thing you want to do isn't the thing people want you to do. And that's disheartening, man. Anyways, he comes to for real this time in a wheelchair in the middle of a large room in a shot that's as beautifully artistic as the upcoming scene is devastating. Still hazy from the drugging he just underwent, he can't even manage to speak, and soon his captor begins shouting good morning taunts his way. Howard goes hard into the gaslighting here, telling Wallace he passed out seemingly out of nowhere before he noticed a spider he identified as a highly poisonous brown recluse crawling out of Wallace's pant leg. Wallace asks where his phone is, but what do you know? A mysterious doctor stepped on it. He explains that his ankle had swollen to the size of an elephant's, and the doctor had to take drastic measures. Wallace pulls the blanket draped over his leg back to reveal his leg has been removed.
Holy shit! There's no leg there. Doesn't appear to be.
He demands a phone, but Howard insists he can't as the doctor has removed them all. And we cut to a beautifully shot dinner scene, with Wallace and his captor on either sides of a long, beautifully finished table in a lavish dining room. It's here that Howard reveals his plan. He's been molding a very realistic walrus costume and wants to shape and mold Wallace into it to replace his long-lost friend, Mr. Tusk. Like that pet you missed from the beginning, remember? We cut to a monologue that Allie is giving in a hotel room with her lover, confessing her guilt over cheating, before we pull back and reveal her lover is none other than Teddy. We get more flashbacks of Wallace, and I think these do their job incredibly effectively. Wallace was not a good person before this. He cheated, he lied, and he got to the top on the backs of people he exploited. It leaves the viewer in a conundrum because while he is unquestionably kind of a bad dude, you still feel for him as he's mutilated and psychologically torn apart through the last half of this movie. Wallace comes to yet again in his new wheelchair, this time to the sound of his very not broken phone ringing. Allie has begun to worry about him and is calling to check on him. He misses the call, however, and we see from her perspective Allie putting the phone on silence and walking away as he calls again and again. He decides to leave a voicemail letting her know he's in danger. Howard shows up and is none too happy about this revelation, knocking him out and telling him,
Your life as you knew it is over, Mr. Brighton. So if you wish to continue living, you will be a walrus or you will be nothing at all.
Allie hears the voicemail the next day and leaps out in a hurry, but not fast enough to avoid yet another disturbing surgery scene. This time Wallace's other leg is removed and his arms are grafted to his torso as Howard tells a story about his father in his signature verbose oration. The next scene is a tough one to handle as we see Wallace in all his walrus glory. Walrus? Wallace? I just got that. Howard waxes poetic as we see Wallace's toe fins and nose back to the sound of his shrieks. It was reassuring to see behind the scenes that Justin Long felt super gratified by the end of filming this. He actually had a lot of fun in his walrus regalia apparently, telling about how he'd make short videos for his friends and even the time his dog visited the set.
I made little commercials, like I went in the walrus outfit. I was like, "Hi, I'm Justin Long." My dog came and saw me one day. He saw me in the full walrus. He freaked out. It was really mean.
The other two are still hot on their trail, mostly with no luck, until they run across French private eye, Guy Lapointe. As much as I love Guy, played an hilarious cameo by Johnny Depp, he feels really out of place in this movie. I don't know. I know he's meant to bring a sense of levity to a movie that is currently full throttle unsettling in the other story, but at times it changes the tone so dramatically between scenes it doesn't feel completely coherent. Guy Lapointe knows about Howard's little walrus games and warns their friends that while Wallace may still be alive, it might not be in the same capacity as they currently know him. Meanwhile, Howard is training Wallace to embrace his inner walrus. Walrus, that's so... He's taking him on swims and feeding him a whole mackerel, which was done by giving Justin Long a mouthful of tuna. Meanwhile, Guy ends up at the same gas station ran by those same snot-nosed kids. Also, Johnny Depp acting in a scene with his daughter, if you're into that. Never been a fan, personally. He discovers the address using a nifty little detective trick.
They did in The Big Lebowski.
You know that's exactly where I learned it from. Isn't that weird?
Okay.
Back at the Walrus torture mansion, Howard reveals his true motivation. In order to survive the ordeal with Mr. Tusk, shortly before being rescued, he had to kill and eat his big sea friend. Since then, overcome with guilt, he's tried to give Mr. Tusk a second chance at survival by reviving him through others. All this being said, it's time for a walrus fight. As Howard straps on a weird walrus suit I guess he just had laying around and makes Wallace fight for his life. By now, Guy, Allie, and Teddy have found the property and are making their way inside. They hear the sounds of distant shrieks and walk in just in time to find Wallace, now full walrus, over the impaled body of Howard. Allie yells, as Guy lines up the shot that would put Wallace out of his walrus misery. Except he doesn't. We cut to a year later at the Manitoba Exotic Animal Sanctuary, where we see Allie and Teddy. They visit Wallace, who's now fully transformed into a walrus. She feeds him a fish, and he's transported to a simpler time, a time he was human, tossing around bed with the woman he was in love with. She tells him she loves him, as a single tear flows down his face and exits with the last piece of his humanity. I rate these videos on tension, kills, score, acting, plot, and direction. Not in that order. Tension is this movie's bread and butter. The gory, over-the-top body horror might be the main draw, but the stellar performances by Parks and Long anchor what should by all accounts be a very silly movie. They make this feel genuinely disturbing in a plot that could have gotten real corny real fast. I'm only docking a point because I think some of the levity moments bring a little bit too much levity. me. And it's kind of jarring to get back into horror mode when we cut back to, you know, the man being slowly mutilated and disfigured. I have to dock it a bit because technically there are only 2 kills, with Kill Bill Kid and Howard at the end. That being said though, this category has always also been about makeup effects as well, which this movie does masterfully. Furthermore, while he may not die, I would argue, and I'm sure director Kevin Smith would argue too, that the fate Wallace is dealt is one much worse than death. The music here might be my only complaint. I think there are some opportunities to do something really cool here. What was Wade McNeil doing at the time? Was he still in Alexis on Fire? Who am I looking at? But yeah, it was serviceable but unremarkable, hence the perfectly average score. Justin Long, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated and underutilized actors of the 21st century so far. And before you ask, I already have an underappreciated career video lined up for him. He's excellent here as well. And man, I cannot say enough about Michael Park's performance here. He really sells this deranged seaman. Seaman. Even most of the side characters play their parts fairly well. It's a classic body horror plot, man becomes beast. I think the backstory given to Howard was engaging, and I love what they did with Wallace. Wallace had created this entire false persona to gain internet notoriety. So really, Wallace was never himself, even before this incident when he was quite literally, physically transformed. Just good writing. Kevin Smith, as I said earlier, was flexing here. The shot selection, the pacing, all noticeably thought out at the hands of a man with a whole lot of experience in this industry. He may not exactly be known for his contributions to the horror genre, but everything about how this movie was shot really tells you how much he respects the genre. And I'm not just a Kevin Smith fanboy either, I think his stuff is fairly hit or miss. But this was a hit in my eyes, and a big one. Alright, so 52 out of 60, and my bias is showing, but that equals roughly 87%, which means it passes The Dark and the Wicked as the highest rated movie in this series so far. We'll see if that holds up though, because my next video will cover another one of my favorites, We Are Still Here, and I don't think it will. So anyways, thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Follow me on all the socials. Busy week again next week. Like I said, I'm doing We Are Still Here. I'm going back to Forgotten 80s Gems with Chopping Mall, and doing another video essay I'm very excited about with Melancholia. But that's about it. Stay tuned for those, and until next time, stay safe.